Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining this panel. This panel is dedicated to indie artists. The title is Indies Not Alone. I curated this panel personally because as an indie artist myself, playing in an indie band, both in the Balkans and in the UK, I see very much the differences of indie artists there and indie artists here, but also the similarities. But what I personally think is that we are more aware of the differences, but we are not aware of the similarities. That's why this panel is made of a mixture of great people coming from different regions of the world, different professions, and different backgrounds. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Martin Gioni. I'm currently directing and curating this conference. First of all, I'm a musician. I play for the band Rusty Halo, and I'm a session musician. Then, the road to becoming an industry professional, working as a promoter, working in marketing. Now, I would like to kick off this panel by having everyone introduce themselves. And I would like to kick it off with Dimitrisz, who's also coming from Believe Music. Now, Dimitrisz, besides introducing yourself, I would very much like you to introduce yourself, the company that you represent or that you wish to represent here, and what actually do you do so that the indie artists that we have here know which person to meet, they can know specifically like what the opportunities are for them.
Okay, so hello guys, my name is Dimitrisz Topuzidisz. I work for Believe Music. I'm from Budapest, Hungary, and I am leading the business development and label management for the Balkans region. And I'm sure you all know that Believe Music is working with music distribution, digital distribution, artist services, and label services. And in my scope, the most important part is to find new talents, find new labels, and to make sure that the existing clients get the best of the services and the best of the knowledge coming from the market.
Perfect. Thank you, Dimitrisz. Now we're up to Matthew.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I work for a Saudi company called Middle Beast. My role and responsibility is as the executive director of music and talent to really establish a music business and industry in the country that had very little, if anything at all, in terms of music. Obviously, music was haram, unless it was religious music. And those major changes since 2016 that have happened in the country. And Middle Beast started with a festival in 2019, then COVID, and it gave the business time to reflect on what does this country need to establish a sustainable music industry. And the record label function was one of them. So joining the business in 21, my role has been to establish labels. We work with Believe, but we also work with a number of other distribution partners. And we consider ourselves a slightly disruptive, modern record label in the sense that we're not asking for the artist's contracted blood in perpetuity of license. You know, we do not do that. In fact, we have a spectrum of different deals, which is sometimes problematic, okay? But what brings together is we try to use as much tech and innovation in that process as we possibly can. I've introduced a publishing company, which is Saudi's first publishing company, and to allow artists to understand what their rights are, and singer-songwriters. But also, and now working on, I've launched a radio station there, broadcasting across the kingdom, and also a syndicated radio show that actually goes to 22 countries around the world. And who would have imagined that 22 radio stations around the world would have been playing a Saudi Arabian, 1 hour of Saudi Arabian dance music? You know, pretty outstanding, really, and when you think about that. But yeah, it's a tough environment, it's a new environment, and I would welcome anybody to change your opinions of the country and come and take a visit.
Thank you, Matthew.
I love Saudi Arabia. I'm just putting that out there into the universe. Hi, my name is Ade, also known as Uncle Ade. I am a former manager of a production team called the Baker Boys, who produce What Now on the Rihanna album Unapologetic. I am also a music educator. I teach at a number of institutions in the UK, and am now Senior Vice President of Artists and Business Development at a new digital platform, which is a blockchain-powered artist and label services platform with a 360 artist-to-fan revenue model. I want to throw out there that I have been independent all my life. I'm like a ride or die independent. I release my own music independently. I signed to major independent record companies, always shied away from majors. And so this is something that's really dear to my heart, my mindset. And we built GrooveUp, which is the platform I talked about. We built it with the independent in mind. We should be launching that as a MVP in about the next 6 weeks. And I'm hoping that it's going to change the music industry landscape.
Thank you, Ade.
Hello. So my name is Dr. Maha. I'm here representing BIM University, which is a music university based in London, but also with campuses around the UK and in Germany and Ireland. So my background in BIM is as course leader for music business, as well as performance in business and songwriting in business. But the route into that for me is as an artist. So I run a record label. We've put out approximately 200 releases, with about 40 of them hitting a UK chart of some description. Pretty kind of experienced in independent fundraising. So like my last record, we got Arts Council funding for. We also did a lot of fundraising in advance through pre-sales, and that album actually hit #1 in the UK rock chart, which was kind of amazing.
Nice.
As an independent. I'm also a multi-instrumentalist, so I play the guitar, bass, drums, vocals, and represent up brands such as, wow, it feels like a long intro now. Brands such as Zildjian, Marshall, and so on. What else do I do? Oh yeah, I've got a couple of songwriting awards with the UK songwriting contest, and have a PhD in psychology, as well as looking after a music studio in West London. So I kind of got like a lot of different experience with tours in about 10 countries to date. But so usually I can answer a lot of questions, which kind of is fun, because I really enjoy working with other artists and supporting them, mainly through independent routes. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It seems like we need every one of you here, like, to spend a few months in Albania, just to start building things up, if you don't mind.
Send the order.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for the presentation. I think honestly, jokes apart, you're the right people to be here. Now, I wanted to start actually with Matthew. We were having a chat yesterday with Matt and talking about the Middle East, and talking about how similar the Middle East might be for Albania, the opportunities there are here for the region. And since the point of the whole conference is developing the region, one of the goals of the conference is like, when you stepped in the Middle East for the first time, because I know the industry in the UK is very, very different from there. When you stepped for the first time and you probably saw that, likewise here in the Balkans, arguably the lack of infrastructures, the audience was different, a lot of systems probably were not known there. What was the first thing that you noticed that you had to work to change for the industry to kickstart? Like the first thing you absolutely did there, and how did that go?
Well, the first thing we had to do was really put business affairs in place. Contracting. Everything in the kingdom up to that point and across the whole of the Arab world was very much session musicians would come along, get paid, walk away, no more involvement. Okay? For some people, I've got my dollars in my pocket, I've got my real in my pocket, and away I'll go. Okay? But there was no business affairs, there was no legal structure. So we were the first ones to really draft a master license agreement, which meant by drafting that master license agreement, okay, we could set the precedent of that. And our first precedent was 50-50. We did not deviate from 50-50, okay? Why 50-50 rather than, you sign a major deal and it'll be 70% in favor of the 80% in favor, of the label, and they would recoup out of your 20%, and we recoup everything straight up off the top. We share 50-50. So it was setting these precedents, and it was based on the business affairs. The second point, simultaneously, was finance. Knowing that we had a financial structure in place that was robust and at the level that you would expect anywhere else in the world. Okay. The third point that still has not manifested yet is a collection society.
Oh,
and
yeah,
and the respect for the artist's IP, their creativity, the songwriter, the producer, the fact that we're all hearing music here. I heard cover versions of Michael Jackson. Nobody's getting a cover version. Michael Jackson, the master rights owner is not going to see that, but the publishing rights should be going somewhere. So you sit there in a hotel in Riyadh, and you're hearing this music, and you're like, these guys have not got a license for this. Why have they not got a license? Because nobody's issuing the license. Yeah. So that PRO does not exist, and that was the third point simultaneously. It was like, we've got to sort this out, but it's still not there yet. Okay, but the business side needed to be established, and very quickly.
Thank you, Matt, for that. It sounds very much a lot like what we need here, to be fair. I see a lot of indie artists here in the room for Albania, and when you mentioned the PROs, and when you mentioned everything actually that you mentioned, there is some that is lacking, not only in Albania, but across the region. I would like, Profado, if you want to add to that, but from the African perspective and the comparison from that to the UK, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to that. No collection society, but actually there is a collection society, they just don't function. Nobody pays license fees, radio stations, TV stations. They're not very good at collecting, and more importantly, they're absolutely useless at distributing those rights to the artists. So the money doesn't trickle down through. About 3 years ago, some business partners and myself looked into how we could create a system for the collection of royalties in Nigeria in particular, using some very simple tools, actually, to at least get nightclubs and radio stations to start to register, because there's no way that somebody who hears that song, Michael Jackson song here, it can't be registered. But actually it starts with the DJs who play the music. Let's restrict their access to the music in the first place, and when they access the music, they have to make a contribution at that point. So we have a very, very similar kind of ecosystem there. I spoke earlier on about the fact that in Nigeria there are over 100 different languages. So you have language challenges as well. Plus, of course, the lack of education. In Nigeria, there is actually only one recognized music business institution across the whole of the country, which is absolutely bizarre, given that it represents around about $1.2 billion in revenue annually and sits at number 6 on the chart in international export in terms of value. So it's about trying to work with government, work with policymakers in trying to ensure that everybody who needs to get paid gets paid, but also that we recognize the value of it as an export and we start to be intentional about that. And that kind of stuff is starting to happen now. But we started at a very low base. But what I will say is this: what you're able to do in places like Saudi Arabia and Nigeria is to implement new systems like blockchain technology, et cetera, that the UK refuses to adjust to. Yep. Because it means that their old systems become completely obsolete and they have to invest in new ones. So we are in a position of advantage if we are intentional about the way in which we exploit and manage.
If I may add a bit of an anecdote here. In 2021, we had Soundstorm Festival in 9 different stages. I was adamant that we should have a performance license in place, even though there was no collection society. So we worked with a collection society in Abu Dhabi called ESMA. Okay, they had no jurisdiction, but they did have the relationships back with PROs around the world. We put black boxes on every single stage, a bit like a Shazam. Yeah, I was able to identify over 4 nights. I think we had 20,000 plus tracks that we fingerprinted and through a box. And in real time, we could see all the tracks, all the publishers, okay, songwriters, and in theory, I could have gone and sent them all a check. In theory, okay? But the PROs globally don't like that level of transparency. Yeah. I'd say 3 years, 3 months, and 60 days. You know? Yeah. But this level of transparency does not work with this idea of the black hole of collection societies. That it disappears into there, and then they divvy it up. And who gets paid? The top. The majors, you know. If I put a song out and it was played at a festival, it's likely that my publishing would actually go to Taylor Swift.
Can I add a little bit from the UK perspective? I mean, we definitely have the organisations there in terms of collecting rights for, you know, song recordings, songwriting, but actually a lot of independent artists are not correctly set up on these platforms to actually collect the money that comes in. So much like Matthew's saying that the money that goes in will go into a black box, and then because a lot of independent artists are not correctly signed up on their PRSs and MCPSs, which are the organizations, that the money will then go back to the majors that are not supporting them. So it's actually, you know, music education is really important for that, because it's going to tell independent artists how to actually sign up, where they should sign up, and why that's important, so that the money actually stays within the independent circuit rather than out there funding the majors, funding the major DSPs, like, for example, Spotify, that tend to, you know, not even pay artists unless they're getting over 1,000 streams. You know, if this was an eBay store, I don't know if you guys have eBay here, but if it was a market store, we can't simply not pay the small stores. Every store needs to be paid. So, yeah. That's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you, Maha. Now I want to get Dimitri's perspective, because I believe on this panel, Dimitri is the closest to the region. And I believe you have a very good perspective, even the data probably, of the comparison of the different regions and everything. Now, continuing in what Matt said, Adi said, and Maha said, which was the PROs, the lack of transparency, the contracts, the business factions, how do you judge that from belief perspective? Are those challenges that you see with the artists and the labels that you work here? Feel free also to add any examples if you want to add, or anything, so we can make it as relatable as possible to the artists and professionals in the room.
Yeah, of course. So technically, when we opened the Balkans market a few years ago, we faced the same issues, and we're still facing them day to day. Of course, lack of contractual agreements between labels and the artist itself, lack of transparency between the manager and the artist, lack of transparency between local distributors and media companies. And so technically, in a country like Albania, one of the biggest hardships for any kind of business to start making difference is the lack of trust between people, lack of trust towards contracts in general, lack of trust about anything that comes close to handling money, paying money, collecting money, and then sending to the labels and the artists a few months later, because this is how it works. So all in all, we had to start to educate the market and to really first find the right labels and the right artists who were ready at that moment to jump on the ship. Okay. And to start making the local markets transparent and a little bit whiter in the sense of, I don't know, financial literacy and transparency, etc. So when a proper distribution arrives to a new market, a fresh market, and they can establish transparent data and information search from the DSPs through money, through streams, to the artists and the labels, they not just start to understand how the digital side of the business works, but they start to have, or gain trust at least, and start to have the leverage and the opportunity to think on the digital turf a few years ahead already, and not just day to day. So one of the most important thing here is to really bring as much information, as much leverage and transparency to the region as we can. So these artists have more money actually, more tools to develop and to make, I don't know, the local markets becoming a part of the already established markets of the world.
Perfect. Thank you, Dimitri. Now, I wanted to touch on an interesting point, because we kind of all touched a bit on tech. And we kind of touched on the tech, and we touched on the human element. Now, in the Balkans, as we were also like saying now, or overall, I would guess, when there is no industry structure, there will be the trust issue, let's say, in a way. However, I was reminded now of a story that you were telling me, like, because I studied under Professor Nade in the University of West London, and one of the first stories that you told me was that your song was played in the radio massively, and then that you didn't get much or nothing out of it after a while just because of that, like zero out of it. Now, and there's also a lack of trust there, like that's everything there in one, like, and that happened in the UK. It didn't happen in the Balkans, that happened in the UK. My question would be, with the digital tools that we have now to open also opportunities for indie artists, can we use digital tools for indie artists in the region to compensate for the lack of trust? So, what would you recommend artists to use to go a bit over that? The tools that they can use, the technology they can use, how can they exploit that so they can actually have some revenue for themselves besides what's happening, the lack of transparency in the local market and everything? And I would like you, Prof, if you could have over the mic for this one to answer. It's a broad question, I know, but I know that you will bring your perspective to it.
Okay, so for context, I should give a quick
Yeah.
summary. I was signed to a record label many years ago called Shut Up and Dance. Had a record that was A-listed on Kiss FM at the time, which was the biggest dance station at the time, and it was A-listed, which meant it got played every hour. And ordinarily, if you're on radio, like on a station like Kiss, every time the song is played, it's around between £8 and £16 every time it gets played. It was A-listed for around about 8-9 weeks, and when it came to distribution, I got zero, not a penny. And the reason for that is because Kiss FM was what we call sampled, so it meant that it was only sampled actually at the time 1 day in 90. So it means that the Collection Society would only list the songs that got played on that one day. And unfortunately on that one day, my song wasn't listed, therefore I didn't get anything, which meant my money went to the top 15%. And that's a policy that still exists today. But tech can resolve that. Like I said, blockchain-powered technology gives you the facility to account 100% of all music that gets played without doing anything. You can literally listen to a stream and identify all of the songs. So using a black box kind of scenario, you can literally listen to the stream and identify every song. It just is dependent upon whether or not the policymakers decide to make that a law, if you like. They don't do that in the UK. They're still on this thing that we call 3 months and 90 days, which means you don't get paid for 6 months on something. And when you talk about the store, no store could survive if they were only getting paid 6 months after they'd sold all of their stock and the next stock. They'd go out of business immediately. So that's something that can be fixed because there is real-time royalty distribution now. There's a company called Revelator who are from Lebanon or something like that, I think. Don't want to insult anybody, but they provide blockchain-powered real-time royalty distribution, so you can have your phone up and you have a smart wallet, and every time your song gets played anywhere around the world, the amount that you get will calculate up in your wallet. The only thing is, because the collection societies still distribute 60 days in arrears, you would still have to wait for that money, although Revelator will allow you to draw down on a commission. Does that make sense? So the system is in place to resolve that issue, which means places like Saudi, places like Nigeria, and places like the Balkans can lobby, although we know it's illegal here, lobby in your own way, the policymakers to make those things rule, to put in place collection society stipulations that mean that people have to be paid 100% accountability, 100% distribution on a basis that is you eat what you kill, rather than favoring the top 15%. I could go deep into politics here, but I'll resist that temptation. But that's what I think.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I want to pass the mic to Maha now. I've seen your career. Love the tracks. I read about the #1 thing in the UK. Brilliant. And I know that you've been a long time in the market. And I wanted to kind of ask, still sticking to the independent artist, still sticking to the opportunity of technology. From when you started the career, back in the day as an indie artist, to now, how has technology, and I mean everything, from social media to marketing to everything, changed that for you? Like, how hard was it in the beginning? How hard is it now? And what's easier and what's more difficult? Like, how would you judge that?
That's quite a big question.
Yep.
I mean, definitely, like, emerging in the internet era when things are available and you can kind of contact and reach out artists, probably through social medias. I mean, one of the big things that I've seen is the rise and fall of different social media sites, like, for example, MySpace, Facebook is now, declining for the younger generations. Now we've got TikTok, and there's questions about whether TikTok's even going to be around in the future. These things have changed a lot, but I think it's really important to have a direct connection with your fans, with your audience, because then you can keep in contact with them, tell them what you're doing through email or text or whatever method you use. And, like, for example, Instagram now, we've got broadcast channels. And this is great. This is like a way to directly update people that are actually really interested in what you're doing. Whereas if you're kind of just building numbers on some generic platform that may or may not exist in 5 years' time, that's actually a waste of your energy. And I feel the same about Spotify as well, in terms of pushing everyone to streaming. And I'm not sure what the main platforms you have here are, but, everyone loves YouTube, but if you push everyone towards that platform, you are not going to be able to contact them again. So I think just kind of regardless of the technology changes, that it's just really important to connect with people through gigs, through email, not relying on social media. And then also places like Bandcamp or having your own store are going to help people to be able to connect with you on a personal level. And, technology's there as well if you want to expand that. During the lockdown, one of the big things that we did with the label was move our shipping into a warehouse. And that was really cool. Again, another technology-assisted solution for artists. But yeah, I mean, we've done lots of things to do with NFTs and kind of testing these out. But again, I think there's a bit of a reluctance to get behind it. I definitely own some NFTs, and I encourage other artists to give it a go. But, I think there's other mechanisms that you can use as well.
Thank you for that.
That answers the question.
Thank you for that. Now, there's a very interesting point of that, which I 100% agree. It's kind of what I would say, like, to kind of sum it up for the people is to focus on the direct connection and not to focus a lot on the tool that makes it possible for you to have the direct connection to the people. Because also, in my opinion on it, I think we lose too much time, I believe, as artists, on the streaming, and we make it a goal in itself, the streaming. Especially, there is something that we have here, because I get a lot of questions all the time, like about streaming, about everything. And people are so focused on that in the region because my thought behind this, because since they see it as a detached thing here a bit from reality, because Spotify here is new, like I believe it was only legally downloadable here in the region about 2 or 3 years ago. So it's a very new thing. When it comes to Pandora, or when it comes to everything else, it's non-existent, like when it comes to every other platform. Deezer also. Vodafone, I believe, or One Albania tried to make a deal with Deezer back in the day, so you could actually stream the songs there with an offer for the phone or something. But it really didn't hold up, because it was a new concept. Now I want to go a bit specifically to streaming, and kind of started with Dimitri, and then pass on to everyone, like to hear the perspective for everyone. Now, when it comes to streaming, Dimitri, how do you judge the approach that artists make on the region to streaming? And do you find that streaming is becoming a priority in the region yet? Or is it becoming kind of too much of a priority and we are ignoring other things? With your experience with Believe and working with artists in Believe and everything.
Yeah, it's a complex question because it's important to understand that I think the bigger stars here in the region in Albania, I don't know, Serbia, for example, even though they are making already a large amount of money on streams, they still live from live performances. So for them, it's still just like a 30% of the revenue stream. But of course, they look at it as the income that can really fuel their, I don't know, their wallet to invest into the image. You can say that. But at the same time, of course, we can see that people are getting, and artists are getting more and more conscious about how they can monetize and capitalize on streams. But we have to talk about, for example, in Albania, YouTube still did not make ads on the platform.
Yeah.
Hence, 90% of the views are yet unmonetized. So there's a huge amount of money still left on the table. And I think as long as in the region, or especially in Albania and Kosovo, they cannot solve the issues with the composition claims and rights and etc., YouTube will not allow the ads to be on the videos. But on the other hand, yeah, of course, most artists and labels are now more and more conscious about how they can build a successful business on digital only, and digital besides live concerts. I think it's healthy now. I think it's still growing. The consciousness is still not there. For example, it is in the Western European countries, of course. But Albania specifically, highly musical country, and they are very good at music business, honestly. So as soon as all the legal things and YouTube will start to be monetized as well, I think it's going to, I don't know, triple, quadruple in a single year.
Thank you, Dimitri. Now, I wanted to get over to Matt. When you first went to the Middle East, just keeping specifically at streaming and the digital part, like, how did it change from the time that you worked there? Because I kind of want to make a similarity of how it might look here after the few years. The situation when you first went to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East with streaming, the situation with everything digital there in the region. What would you comment on that?
So in Saudi, there's nothing missing in terms of DSPs. They're all there. Their regional DSP is Angami, Lebanese, but based out of Dubai. Also, Dubai is where all the DSP's offices are based. And sorry, they're about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Yeah, they are absolutely useless. Okay? We can pitch to them, we go in, we take our artists in there, we introduce them, we lay it all on, we invite them to our events, we treat them as they want to be treated as DSPs, try and influence them, but they have zero influence. Yeah? That goes up the chain. You know, I'll get point of comparison here. Recent IFPI data that's just come out, okay? Oh, the Middle East is the fastest growing market. Again, it was 3 years ago, it's now again 22.8% growth. Do you know how much that's actually worth? The entire market is worth 144 million. My ambition is to be driving that level of revenue every single month in my company alone. Okay, I mean that's That's the ambition. That's what my bosses want me to do. You know, that's the level of ambition we're going to get to. It may be the 10-year to get there, but that's what we want to do. 144 million. That's a population in the region of, I think if I've got this right, is about 500 million people in the entire MENA North African region that's covered by this area. Australia has 26 million people, okay? And their value of their music industry is closer to 600 million. Okay, so you can start to see here there's something very, very wrong with streaming in different markets. You know, the Saudi market, the Middle East market is worth $1 per 1,000 streams. The European market, the US market is $2.50, to average $3, okay, as it is in Australasia and North America. I don't know what it's worth here, but I'm going to speculate that it's $1. That you cannot build a business on that without looking for international, without looking at the diaspora.
Yep.
Afrobeat, classic example. Latin American reggaeton, classic example. They're never going to make money off streaming at home. It's where the diaspora is. Streaming is not going to buy you a cup of coffee, let alone a boat.
So it all comes down to exporting it to the regions where it pays more.
Yes, you have to get yourself into the regions where it pays more, yes.
Yep.
Let's break this down. Live performance, paid to perform, having venues to perform in. That's what independent artists needs. And if you're looking for an independent label, find an independent label that is not a label, they're a community.
That's a perfect point there. We're going to go afterwards to the community. We're going to start with you, Maha. First, I wanted to go to Professor Ade, because when I hear the quote, "Don't leave money on the table," and when I also hear about disruption, I can't unthink of our lessons. And I wanted to go specifically to Spotify, because I know that you've worked a lot in that specific topic and did a lot of work in that specific topic. And I want to get to the, now it's not a new deal, of the deal of that you can't make anything unless you have 1,000 streams on Spotify. And I wanted to hear your comments on that first. And second, how would you judge, how could streaming be useful, be used as a tool for artists? What would be your tips for artists here for streaming to be used as a tool, as not the final end goal?
Okay, cool. Thank you for the question. You already know me. So first of all, we already know that streaming, depending on the territory, is worth an average of 0.00367p, a third of a penny. That I'm putting that on my tombstone, so everybody knows that we got hustled. That's why I ended up in 10 feet under. But we should understand that the problem is that the people that decided on the value of the stream had no concept of the value of the music. So therefore, they were able to put a price on it that is absolutely worthless. And part of that is our responsibility as musicians, as creatives, and as people who love the music. Because we're too quick to give it away. We're too quick to give it away because we actually don't understand its true value. And I say it like this. Music is one of the most powerful forces in the world. It can change a life. It can literally save somebody's life. It is often a defining moment in somebody's life. And if we want to get down and dirty, it can be the beginning of somebody's life. But nonetheless, it is a powerful force. We just don't understand that. So the people who make the decisions can make those decisions on our behalf without consulting us, because we're happy for the attention, which is why TikTok can actually exist. We're not getting paid off of TikTok. It's not even per stream, it's per use. So I can have 1 million streams on TikTok, but only 10 uses, and I'll get paid 10 times 0.00367p. So it's not even a metric that we should consider. Streaming, in my opinion, is a misdirection of attention that is developed by the powers that be to keep us poor and grateful and desperate. And so what we were talking about earlier on was the idea of NFTs. And I say that we should be focusing on NFTs, but in a broader sense, talking about what we call phygital, not just digital. So that we add the physical element to it again and bring the true value in product. And that product can be anything from a rubber wristband, which might be worth £1, which your markup is going to probably be about 70%. And then vinyl, which again could be worth £25. Again, your markup could be 70%. And that the string, the 0.00367B thing, is just a promotional tool, which means that musicians, independent musicians, need to stop looking at streaming as the exit strategy and start to understand that it's a promotional tool for you to convert that attention to somewhere that you can monetize it.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, we also have the drum beat in the background. However, we will edit it out afterwards using the latest AI tools. Yes. We're going to go just a bit on AI. In the end, though, because I know that probably people want to hear a bit on that. However, now I want to direct the mic to you. We got to the point we talked about technology. We talked about streaming, and we have some excellent points there. Now I want to get to the root of it all. Matt mentioned the word community, which is spectacular, because the artists that I'll build here in the Balkans are pretty much everywhere are built out of a community. Even my experience with my band in London is that it all started out from the community that was following us, till we kind of started to get the attention and people were calling for us. And I sort of started to formulate this theory that the labels or manager or everyone, at a certain point, they will come to you when you make the noise. It's enough for you to kind of build yourself up and to build a community at that point. Now, going back to your career and to everything, what were the major tips, touching on also on what you said before regarding emails and everything, that you would give to people to build their community and also to motivate a bit the artists who kind of start out with that 5 or 10 people community? Because I noticed here that a lot of bands start building here the community of 10 people or 15 people, 20 people, and they always say, oh, it's not enough because there in the West they're doing this incredible thing and I only have 20 people here. So what would you say to those people, how to keep the momentum up and how to make that community so that the labels and everyone actually comes to search for you?
Okay, so I mean, I can't speak on the last bit because a lot of my own journey was built because the labels and the managers didn't come, and therefore I had to build the next level with the community that was around me. So I can't speak on that last bit, but in terms of building your community, I would just say, just be real. As an artist, understand as best as you can who you are and actually really represent it, because if you do that, then the people that will find you in your music are going to naturally connect with you. Building like a street team and like a group around my project was really enriching for me because the people around were people that I would have wanted to be in it. And I think having that right culture around you is really important because then fans, supporters can feel free to say something and for it to really matter in the direction of the project. So, I mean, I think, yeah, it comes down to culture, just kind of being as real as you can be. And the people that will find you are going to be people that you really want to connect with.
Thank you so much on that. Now, please keep the mic, because now we're going to the education part. And a lot of you here are educators. And I want to touch on very specifics. Do you have a manager at the moment, or are you self-managed?
I'm actually self-managed.
Okay, perfect. Now, coming to the specific knowledge on management, because you're also an educator at BIM. Regarding self-management, as an indie artist, what are the absolute things that you would tell to everybody here in the room, like 3 or 5 things that you should now go and study, that you should now really go and insist on to become self-managed? What are the things that you would tell your students that out of this 1 year or 3-year course in music business, at least get these 3 or 5 things and work on those? And then I'm going to keep the same question for you, Prof.
Your questions are so hard.
I'm putting everybody on the spot here.
I just want to say, I probably can't think of 5 things, but
Anyone.
in a supportive educational environment, what you should do, and I mean, I hope I do this from experience. I know that all the team at BIM do the same. We work in the industry and we teach, and we try to shield the flame that is in each student. So if a student has a passion for something, then we can try and advise around that. You know, educate yourself, keep learning, developing in what you're doing. And that can be anything from, you know, making sure that you're signed up to the right agencies in terms of collecting royalties, you know, not chasing the big followers, because this is like a mirage. You know, you want to work on personal, true connections with the fan base, with brands. And yeah, just kind of taking one step forward all the time. I can't think of another 2, but I would like to say this experience here is kind of as a result of the brainchild of Amina, who is sat in the front row, who actually designed this experience in her mind for an assessment. And I think that that speaks more than any advice I could give, because if, as an educator, you can shield the fire and keep the, you know, make sure it doesn't go out, then that's kind of all you can do.
Perfect. Thank you. And also, I wanted just to touch a bit on the questions. So, believe me, like the questions that I'm directing now, it's exactly the questions that I get many times on text here from my musicians friends. They're kind of, I know that they're hard questions, but it's the questions that a lot of people here have, and I know that there's no one answer to any of this. Now, to continue a bit on education, since we do not have any institution here on music business education, and very, very little on creative arts education, what would you say would be, also taking the experience from Nigeria and the conferences and everything we did online, what would be the most easy, the low budget, and the direct way to establish music business and creative business education in the Balkan region or in a not financially stable region? Where would people go for that knowledge, and how do we establish that here? What would you think?
Okay, interesting. So first of all, I want to touch on the idea of community, if you don't mind. We get pressured so much. The music industry is a numbers game, right? We get pressured so much, the number of likes, the number of follows, the number of streams. We're put under all this pressure, which for artists who are delicate flowers, that can really become, can cause all kinds of pressure, which may result in them becoming less confident about themselves, so that they become, what's the term that they use now? Oh God, I can't remember it now. Gone, sorry. But basically, the idea that all of this pressure can force artists to feel less about themselves is a problem. So I think it's really important for us to take a step back and understand what's really happening. For example, we talked about the idea of about only getting 50 likes or 30 likes on a piece of music or a piece of content that you put out. Just look around yourself here. This is 25, 30 likes. This is the beginning of something special. If you take it out of context of the hundreds of thousands of views that Beyonce or Taylor Swift getting, they're not your competition. So that's really important to contextualize where you are in your journey and what success is for you at the point that you're at. So I just wanted to offer that because I think that's a really important thing about the building of community. It starts with 1 and you multiply that. You double that, then you double that 4, double that 8, and you're winning. You're going 100% every time. That's where it starts. Okay, and the next question was?
Establishing a sustainable music education in your experience.
So again, for me, one of the key issues for me about education is that it's not means tested. So that it means that, and I get myself into trouble all the time about this stuff, it means that every artist is going to have to pay approximately 9,000 to 10,000 per year for their degree. And if you take all the other things into consideration in terms of accommodation, loss of earnings, etc., by the end of a degree, they could be around about 76,000 in debt. The chances of them recouping that are very minimal, which means for me that the price point is wrong. And so what we're trying to achieve in Nigeria is that we don't have that kind of system to start with, that we make the courses more accessible and more affordable depending on where you are. And it comes back to don't leave any money on the table. And I know that institutions in the UK, for the most part, do not like online training. They don't like video tutorial training. But actually, for some people, that's affordable. The amount of students that I've seen over the last 5 years who have started to have anxiety issues and all that kind of stuff because they have to balance a full-time job with full-time education in London at the ridiculous prices that you will pay for accommodation and cost of living in London. So actually, I think we have a responsibility, particularly in Nigeria, and I would argue the same here. We have a responsibility to make sure that music education is relative to the likely revenues that you get out of it, which may mean that we do have to embrace video tutorials, that we do have to embrace online learning, and that instead of being in the physical presence of your students 3 or 4 days a week, that maybe you do 3 or 4 days every 6 months. And that way you have a different system that is accessible. That's not going to be for everybody, but it's for those who have difficulties accessing and affording the ridiculous prices that we charge now. So again, it's about not leaving money on the table, but making sure there is room for everybody.
Thank you for that. Now, I believe the music is very loud at this moment, so I would like to open up the floor for the panel, for the people in the crowd, for any questions. Over there, let me bring you the mic.
Hello, panel. I'm really asking this mostly because there's people representing the music industry from different countries here. And what I was wondering, events like this and other festivals and conferences that I've been to, they're brilliant too.
Alton, we can't hear. Could we turn that mic up a little bit, please?
Can you hear me now? Okay. So the reason that I thought I'd ask this question is because there's people here that represent aspects of the music industry in different countries, right? But they're countries with similar experiences to what the countries of the Balkans are having. And I was just wondering, and I'd like to ask the panel what they think, is that whilst festivals like this are fantastic to promote the artists and the music of the area, and some of the music is absolutely fantastic, and some of the artists are really world-class, do you think the lack of organizations like PRS and PPL, like we have in the UK, though I think they joined together now, do you think the lack of these collection management societies and maybe the lack of respect in the area for IP and copyright is a barrier to Balkan musicians and Balkan artists becoming part of the wider world of music? Because I kind of see that it's a difficulty, definitely. So I wondered what the panel thought about this.
If I may start on this one. We live, and music is global at the moment it's ingested into a DSPs, okay? It's global straight away. So, though we do not have a collection society in Saudi Arabia, a PRO, all of my artists who are on our publishing side, songwriters, we register them with Boomer. Don't register with the PRS, and someone says, why don't you do that? I say, because Boomer are nicer. Yes. So if you're in the Balkans, you should register with a collection society somewhere, because you never know where your music's getting listened, consumed, played. You know, if a Albanian DJ plays at Ultra Festival in Miami, they should be and they're playing their own music. They should be registered with a collection society. They should go to that collection society with their set list and go, I played this on this stage at this time at Ultra Festival. I'm owed money. So even though there's no collection society domestically, your music is global by the nature of performance, by the nature of streaming, by the nature of media. A crazy scenario, I have an artist in Saudi called Cosmic Cat. She had a track called Shakshuka. It's a breakfast dish. And it was recently used on Sky Sports. You know, they have a blanket license. They didn't ask us. They didn't need to. We put it out there. And it was used on Sky Sports. And that's probably worth $80. You know? You never know where your music's going to get consumed. So don't leave money on the table. You may not have a domestic collection society, but there are plenty around the world that there are.
Can I just add something on the point that he's talking about? You know, like BT Sport, Sky Sports. These guys won't actually be able to use your music unless it is registered on the correct PROs. So it has to be registered on one, otherwise they actually just won't feature it at all.
Just one thing to add to that is that in America, BMI adjusted their status from a not-for-profit to a profit-making around about 18 months ago. And as part of their policy, that they said that they were interested in looking into blockchain-powered rights administration. The moment they said that, you knew that the game had changed, which means that you can register with a PRO in America now, and who are committed to blockchain-powered royalty distribution, means that you will be able to collect your money from all around the world, even if not in your own territory, and have that real time straight into your smart wallet. So things are changing, and those old systems will become outdated in the same way that MySpace and all those other platforms that we spoke about earlier on, they're no longer in existence. PRS, MCPS, PPL, if they don't change, they will go out of business, and everybody will be able to use a platform like BMI or a Revelator.
Do you want to add to that any final words to the question? I mean, it's still music, so there's tech problems always, the vocals.
So just maybe yeah. Okay, so just one thing I wanted to add to this topic is that we can see that Albanian music is one of the most exportable music country from the region. We know plenty of Albanian singers who are breaking charts in GSA, UK, and in every part of the world. I don't know, we can Duratadora, Era Istrefi. I'm not even going to say Dua Lipa because it's American, but so Albanian music has a very bright future, to be honest. And as it was told here, as soon as you upload your music, it's global. And the more educated you are, and the better tools you have, and the better music you have, let's say, whatever it means, the more chances you have to actually be globally acclaimed and listened and streamed artist.
Thank you, Dimitri. I think, do you want to add? Okay. I think we close it with a high note. I think it's a perfect closure, everyone. So thank you for attending this. I hope you also join the other panels tomorrow. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having everybody here. Yes, and have a good time. The music already started.